What if I told you that one tiny number on your ballot this federal election could help fix the job crisis, take pressure off Medicare, slash court costs, protect Aussie farmers, boost manufacturing, create a brand new export industry, and bring in billions into our economy, all without compromising your political values? Sounds too good to be true, right? It's not, and I'm going to show you exactly why and how. While politicians are still arguing about housing schemes, tax tweaks, immigration caps, tariffs, Aussies can't afford homes, they're waiting to see a specialist, and they're pretty scared that their jobs are about to be replaced with AI. Meanwhile, the biggest parties are still offering the same old broken ideas and expecting, well, something different. Hi, I'm Josip or Joe Lagrasso. I'm a former high school teacher that got kicked out of the system for being too honest about cannabis. These days, I run Creator Club, a digital agency helping businesses scale with better systems. I operate Friendly Aussie Buds, one of Australia's leading cannabis culture platforms, and I've helped scale Grindaroo into one of Australia's largest cannabis brands. Oh, and I've also founded Plant Education, a professional platform where doctors, pharmacists, and healthcare professionals can learn from leading experts on how to properly understand and prescribe medicinal cannabis. I've worked with doctors, growers, clinics, hydro stores, importers, patients, and pretty much everything in between. From where I'm standing, things are pretty clear. The legalized cannabis party is the most logical, practical vote in Australia right now. And if you give me about 15 to 20 minutes, I'm going to show you with real facts, real world examples, and some stories you probably haven't heard before. So later in this video, I'm going to show you how a small US state with the population size of Victoria pulled in more cannabis tax money than Tasmania's entire tax budget. And we're absolutely insane not to be doing the same here. Albo's kind of dodging the hard stuff. Dutton's fear-mongering like clockwork. Meanwhile, Australia is facing some pretty real crises that neither side has a real plan to fix. Let's be real. Housing is cooked. AI is gutting our industries from the inside out. We are mostly white-collar workers who work in offices. There is a lot of replacement happening there. Medicare is falling apart, and we're heading into the Olympics. And we barely manufacture anything anymore. Like, what are we gonna show the world that we do? Where's our future made in Australia plan, Albo? You've mentioned it. Where's the future grown in Australia plan? Instead, we're still digging up rocks, selling gas, and hoping the world doesn't hit us with tariff wars. And we're really not prepared for this in Australia. A 2023 Ipsos study found that 69% of Australians are worried about AI taking over their jobs. That's the highest in the world. And I'm telling you, it's because we're white collar. We're now in 2025. I'm sure that's now at 75%. Meanwhile, food prices are up 9.2% in the last year, rents have jumped 11%, and wages have crept up maybe 3.7%. The math doesn't work anymore, not for regular people. And what exactly are the majors offering? First homeowner buyer lottery schemes. If you're one of the few thousand, you'll get some help. The rest of us are kind of getting left behind. We've got these tiny tax tweaks that are putting a couple extra dollars into your weekly shopping bill. Maybe there's a few things that are, going to be helpful there, but food's still going up. Rents are breaking through, and I'm still broke. We've got more mining royalties. Like, let's go dig up some more holes in the ground because that's going to stop AI from taking my job. Albo's talking about this future made in Australia plan, and it gets me excited, but we don't even manufacture pencils. What kind of plan is that? But we're mostly going to be handing down anything made here to foreign multinationals. We're not building real sovereign industries here. The Liberals, well, their grand scheme is always trickle-down economics and pillaging your super fund. They literally want you to take your super fund to throw it into the housing market. So take from your future and give it to the boomers of today so that they get your future. So this isn't going to build homes, this isn't going to fix Medicare, and we're not going to create jobs with any of that incentive. No plan to even rebuild rural towns. How are we going to retrain all of these displaced workers? How are we going to lower healthcare costs with smarter and safer alternatives? Are we going to invest in Australia? Or are we going to look to invest into industries in Australia where we could lead the global market, not just export the raw material, right? There's no structural vision for Australia. There's pretty much just band-aids and blame games, and it's pretty much all just tied into our property market. And that's why we need a new idea. Just one move that cuts across housing, jobs, healthcare, agriculture, and economic sovereignty. And honestly, that one move is cannabis. In the US, legal cannabis is now the fastest growing industry for employment. Over 420,000 full time jobs were created in cannabis in 2022. That's real jobs. We're talking trimmers, retail managers, security teams, scientists. These are jobs that can't really be outsourced to China, India, or replaced with ChatGPT. If we regulated cannabis properly in Australia, we would unlock, I reckon, 60,000 jobs in rural towns and cities. And that's probably where we need jobs most, because that can allow people to move out of capital cities and go into the rural areas with the opportunity that is allotted to people in capital cities, i.e., the ability to make money. And it's not just jobs. A 2025 meta-analysis study published by the Frontiers in Oncology used AI to review over 10,000 cannabis studies. 75% of them showed positive health outcomes for nausea relief, tumor inhibition, and improved quality of life. That's not stoner wishful thinking. That's hardcore data. That's literally saying cancer is being treated with cannabis. It's being echoed every single day by our Australian oncologists, our palliative care nurses, and our patients. Cannabis isn't really a fringe drug anymore. It's a frontline tool. Imagine how much Medicare pressure could be lifted if 10% of pain management went away from opiates to cannabis. We're talking less addiction, less strain on the system, and less taxpayer money wasted on pharmaceutical companies. Before we dive deeper, let's ground this conversation in reality. According to the Pennington Institute's 2023 report, around 40.6% of Australians aged 14 and over have used cannabis once in their lifetime, and 11.5% have used in this past year. That's millions of Aussies. 11.5%, that's about 3 million Aussies. That's mums, dads, tradies, teachers, nurses, small business owners. This isn't some sort of fringe thing anymore. It's already a huge part of Australian life, and we're just pretending it isn't. Despite this, we're seeing 66,000 cannabis-related arrests each year in Australia. That means for every 10,000 instances of cannabis use, there's only about 3 cannabis arrests. We're wasting police resources, court time, and taxpayer money fighting this crap. This is something our country has done for a long time. It's time for some common sense. So before we talk about these crazy good health benefits, let's just follow the money. Because I think that's often what's going on with decisions for a nation. Is this going to make us money, and does it actually help us get more tax revenue and all of that? Obviously it's a yes, but let's talk about it. So I hope you don't think this is wishful thinking. In February of 2025, the Chinese-backed Y Cannabis Holdings acquired Melbourne-based Phytoka for $62 million. Now, Phytoka wasn't just some sort of boutique farm. They're actually a white label import business, sourcing cannabis from overseas, packaging it up, and selling it under an Aussie brand. And that was enough to grab some serious attention from Chinese investors. Think about that. Importing and reselling cannabis was seen as a $62 million opportunity in Australia. In late 2023, ECS Botanics sold its 44-hectare Tasmanian cultivation site to Blue Buffalo for $3 million. And there was 11 serious bidders in that. In 2024, Canadian giant Aora finalized their deal of MedRelief in a deal worth over $50 million. Aussie patients are spending over $400 million on legal cannabis products in the first half of 2024. So we're talking about $1 billion in a new industry in the medical market in a year. When we compare that to 2022's numbers, that's more than double the entire year. Foreign investment is already so well aware of what's coming. They're locking down the assets, they're building the brands, and they're getting a slice of Australia's cannabis future right now. And most politicians are pretending it's not happening. They don't even know. So I have to ask, if the Canadians, the Chinese, and American investors can see the opportunity, why doesn't our own government?
Since 2014, Colorado, a US state with a population of 5.8 million people, has pulled in just over $3.5 billion in cannabis tax revenue. That's more than Tasmania's entire state budget. Every year, Colorado brings in $300 to $400 million from cannabis taxes alone. And that's not just retail sales. That's jobs, real estate, education, and tourism. Yep, cannabis tourism is real. People travel for culture, the cafes, the dispensaries, just like they do for wine in the Barossa or truffles in Western Australia. Now imagine that kind of experience for Nimbin or the Dandenong or the Byron hinterlands. Australia has what the world wants, some of the cleanest agricultural standards on the planet, strict biosecurity and trust in quality control, strong trade infrastructure, a vast rural land ready for cultivation, and a growing body of clinical, credible evidence from the medicinal space. We already export world-class wine, beef, and pharmaceuticals. Cannabis could and should be the next.
All right, so let's talk about Australia's broken medical cannabis system, because it's a bit of a joke, right? Right now, the system is pretty stretched so far that it's basically a bunch of recreational users pretending to be patients. You want the proof? Well, let's look at Alternaleaf. They're one of the largest telehealth providers in the entire country. They've signed up over 150,000 patients. That's more than most major hospital networks see in specialty care. They've helped thousands of Aussies access legal cannabis, and now they're under threat by the TGA. Why? Because everyone knows the actual truth. The line between medical and recreational is really thin. And instead of building an honest system, we're forcing people to lie. Here's the reality. Doctors are wasting time doing low script renewals. Sick patients, the one with serious chronic illnesses, are struggling to even get to see their GP or their cannabis doctor to update things. Recreational users just want a safer alternative from alcohol, and then they're clogging up the system because there's no other legal option. Meanwhile, our GPs are pretty burnt out because they're trapped doing paperwork that shouldn't exist. We're talking about the SASB approvals and the AP approvals. For you to access cannabis, there is so much paperwork from there to there for each individual script that it is not fair to put that on our doctors. It's silly. This is a drug that doesn't kill anyone. We're able to prescribe so many other things without having to do all of this paperwork, and those things can kill you, and this substance can't. Lunatic. And this is all because the politicians don't want to admit what the ACT has already proven. Since personal home grow was legalized there in 2020, there's been no crime wave, no explosive use by the youth, no collapse in public safety. The Canberra Times put out an article about there was no crime linked to ACT cannabis legalization. In fact, if anything, police freed up their time to actually target real crimes. I mean, domestic violence, assault, and organized crime. We need an adult use system that's transparent, regulated, and honest. Let people who want to use cannabis recreationally come out of the shadows. And let the doctors get back to practicing actual medicine, not acting like a gatekeeper. So where does this leave you and me as voters? Well, if you're stuck of the majors, ignoring reality, there's really only one logical choice. Let's break it down. The Greens, they support cannabis legalization, sure, but their platform, for a lot of Aussies, it feels a little too far left. Too many radical policies lumped into the good stuff, right? The Libs and Labor, well, mate, they're not even thinking about cannabis. They don't even talk about it. They're too scared to offend their conservative donors, and they genuinely think it's 1993. They're not aware of any of this. And what about the kind of more far-right parties, One Nation, the Liberal Democrats? Either you get a bit of racism, a bit of anti-science nonsense, or you're voting in some sort of racist agenda. Ugh, doesn't feel good, does it? And a lot of them don't really have a real clue about cannabis legalization. They don't really understand this industry or this community. They just know that it can get them votes because it's sensible. So that's why I propose to you, the regular Australian, there is only one choice this election, and it is the Legalized Cannabis Party. They're not just stoners that are yelling out from the clouds. These are people who have actually come up with real solutions to help this country grow. And it's not a political position anymore. That's something I really want to get across here is whether you're on the left side of politics or on the right side of politics, cannabis doesn't really discriminate there. The fact is, this is something beneficial for everyone in the country. Whether you're going to consume it or not, it's going to become tax revenue for you. Here's what the Legalized Cannabis Party actually wants. They want legal home grow, modelled after the ACT success. They want support for small Aussie businesses, protecting them from cheap Canadian, Thai, South African imports.
This isn't just hurting our farmers, it's threatening our agricultural sovereignty. As a grower told me, we're held to the highest quality standards in the world, and then we have to compete with imports where they don't face that same regulatory cost.
They want streamlined medicinal access, less red tape for patients and doctors. They want court reform so we're not wasting millions locking up people over a plant. They want Australian grown first policies so we protect our farmers. They want evidence-based driving laws, not the presence equals guilt model we have now. And remember, under the preferential voting system that we have in Australia, the number one vote you give is super powerful. Your number one gives $3 in public funding to that party. So if you gave it to the Legalized Cannabis Party, you're going to help them push for reform. You can still preference your preferences, right? So if you prefer Labor, you prefer the Liberals, you prefer One Nation, you prefer the Greens, that's fine. Put them at 2, 3, 4. But legalized cannabis at the top is the only thing you can do right now that is going to make a difference in this country. Otherwise, you're getting all of the same that we've just talked about, right? This is a policy that is so blatantly obvious for Australian citizens to be able to reap the benefits of it all. This is a smart, targeted move for Australia's future. If I haven't convinced you, I just want to show you a little bit of what I see the future of cannabis to look like in Australia. Let's talk about something bigger than economics, right? This is more important than making money. This is about culture and community. Cannabis isn't just an industry. It's actually the chance to rebuild a better and healthier Australia. Picture this. Veterans resting in cannabis lounges at RSLs, vaping instead of sinking 12 beers and then blowing their pensions on the pokies because they're inebriated and don't realize what's going on. Backyard growers growing some nice legal plants that they show off with a lot of pride. Imagine Burke growing the best nugs and being like, guys, look at this sensational plant. Now I want you to think about the young Aussies, right? The guys that have been sidelined, the people who you're calling Centrelink bums. It's like, get off your ass and do something. How about we give them something to do? All of these people, you're like, oh, you know, people who smoke cannabis, they just want to sit around and smoke weed all day. Well, it's true, we do. But I would hazard a bet that so many young people would love to get into cultivation. They would love to get into the retail sales. This is something people have a passion for. I have given up a career in the corporate world to chase this cannabis dream. Right? If I can do it, I'm sure there's so many more that would love that opportunity, but they're worried about how they're going to provide for their friends, their families, their kids, their loved ones. That's concerning. Cannabis could become a point of pride in our identity, not a shameful secret, not a criminal act. In fact, over 80% of Australians already support decriminalising cannabis possession, according to The Guardian. We've also had about 11% of people admit to using cannabis every year, and about 40% of adults have used cannabis in their lifetime in Australia. These are not criminals. That's almost 1 in 2 people. If we put them away for cannabis use, we wouldn't have a society. That's the fact. So if 40% of people in this country have used cannabis and the country's still alive, what's the issue? And I just want to point out that legalization hasn't really led to chaos. In the ACT, the homegrown model has shown that crime rates haven't really changed. Maybe they've actually improved. We could support a billion-dollar export industry. We could champion healthcare for bushfire-resistant homes, creating it out of hempcrete. We could honor both patients and recreational users without stigma. Mate, do you remember when we used to be proud of Holden? Like, we built something with our own hands. Imagine walking into a dispensary one day and seeing a beautiful Aussie strain on the shelf called True Blue Aussie Dream. Locally grown, locally loved, globally respected. Australian made. That's the future we could build if we stop letting fear run the show. Just saying. All right, let's smash through some big myths, right? Will youth use skyrocket? Nah. Studies both from the ACT and international markets have shown that youth usage doesn't typically increase after legalization. In fact, it usually drops because licensed sellers actually card people, where your green market dealer doesn't give a shit about your ID. Is cannabis a gateway drug? Old myth, totally debunked. Most cannabis users never touch harder drugs. The real gateway comes from the illegal market, where dealers push multiple substances. Legal cannabis means we're separating it from the real dangers. Won't crime increase? If anything, crime generally decreases after cannabis legalization because police stop wasting time. They can focus on real crimes like domestic violence, organized crime, serious assaults, hard drug dealing and trafficking. Now, what about driving safety? Current laws are punishing people for having THC in their system, and that's not actually impairment. New models like what Canada's doing are building real impairment testing instead of just blanket bans. We need to modernize, not criminalize. And what about the smell? I hear heaps of people tell me, like, I don't want Australia to smell like weed. It's too much. Well, I don't think it would be everywhere, right? Smoked cannabis that's dank, smells. It reeks, right? Like, that's if you're smoking it through a joint or a bong or whatever. But most cannabis users today, they're not really smoking anymore. They're taking gummies, edibles. They're using oil carriages, dry herb vapes, tinctures, and other inhalation methods. Now, we can regulate smoking cannabis the same way we did it with cigarettes, only in private homes or in licensed venues, not in the street, not in playgrounds. Pretty simple. This isn't about unleashing the chaos. It's about bringing an existing culture to the light, regulating it properly and making it safe for everyone. All right, let's just get really clear. The Greens, sure, they support legalizations, but a lot of Australians see them as too far left. They're pushing a whole raft of policies and they just don't sit right with everybody, and that turns people off. And that's okay. Labor and Libs, they won't touch cannabis, right? It's been buried in their committees, it's dismissed, and it's just not a priority. And then your other far-right parties, maybe they say some things you agree with, maybe they don't. Personally, not for me, but just saying you're going to legalize cannabis while you're talking nonsense, I'm sorry, I'm just not going to give you my vote. I just dream of an Australia where veterans can legally vape instead of being hooked on opiates. I think regional towns can boom again, not because of mines, but because cannabis farms and hempcrete factories. Aussie growers proudly put our bud on the global stage like we did with our wine and beer and beef. Kids grow up understanding the difference between safe and legal cannabis use and the real dangers behind it. Police chase real criminals, not peaceful users. Misfits and battlers find jobs and their place in this world. This federal election, and I'm sorry that I've been very slow in this video, May the 3rd, you've got one chance to make a change in Australia. Just one. So please, consider putting a 1 next to the legalized cannabis party. In fact, send a message that you want real reform based on facts, not fear. You can still preference your usual major party next. That's fine. But your first vote is where the power lies. If you want to push this country forward, consider visiting legalizecannabis.org.au and find out what they're doing for you. If you like this video, hit like, share it with a friend, subscribe if you haven't. I'm Josip. Let's ease the grind together and vote smart, vote green, but not that green, vote legalize cannabis. Authorized by a fully sick stoner from his sesh pad in the beautiful place of Brisbane.